Welcome back to a year of Final Fantasy, and today we're going to end off the month of Fenrir, the month of January 2018, with Lightning Returns Final Fantasy XIII. It's the third game in the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy, and strangely enough, it just does not bear the mark of Final Fantasy XIII-3 at all, anywhere in its title, in the book, in the game, whatever. It's kind of weird, but make no mistake, this game is more connected with Final Fantasy XIII-2 than 2 was to the original. It is definitely in that storyline. So as you might expect, the game features Lightning as the main protagonist, being called Lightning Returns, and it's the only playable character in the game, very much unlike previous games. That's not all that's changed either, and that's why the game itself doesn't actually have that Final Fantasy XIII-3 tacked onto it. And I personally think that they should have had the 13-3 moniker, but I understand their reasoning why it doesn't. The PR that Square Enix has put out is the explanation that the game is so incredibly dissimilar from the other two games that they wanted it to feel like a game unto itself. So that's the reason, and whether you agree or not, your own call. Personally, I mean, everyone still thinks of it as Final Fantasy XIII-3, so I don't know why they didn't put that, but that's what they say. So the game came out in Japan on November 21st, February 13, in the West on February 11th, 2014, and in the EU February 14th, 2014, giving it about a nearly 2-year turnover time, little less than that. Given the changes though, it's actually pretty impressive what they did. That being said, the game kind of did go under the radar there for a while as development kept going. Square kept oddly quiet about the release, but obviously it did eventually come out. Whew. Alright, so let's go over how the game differs from the others, and honestly, that's going to be probably most of what this video is about because there is a lot different here. First, possibly even going further than Final Fantasy XIII-2 did, with the world structure in the game, is pretty intense. It's largely an open world game and has a ton of freedom for, how you're going to approach the game, how you're going to do the story and the quests and everything, and where you want to go. And this was actually created directly in response to Final Fantasy XIII's linearity. Final Fantasy XIII-2 handled it in a little bit different of a way, being the way that you could approach the game via time and dimension traveling with big areas, but not open world. Here, we're going on full, pretty much open world. So it's another way of tackling that overbearing linearity that people just hated Final Fantasy XIII for. And the reason actually they wanted to do this is, one, the setting that Lightning Returns takes place in is really going back and exploring the world more to get more of a sense of people living in there, whereas in the original game you would just pass by, some really awesome looking places. You never really got to interact with them. This game sets to fix that. Battles here are also incredibly different, as there's a real-time factor in play here, and the way that you approach battles are very, very different. Of course, since your only character is Lightning. The Crystarium is nowhere to be seen here, so that's sad because, they took out the name of the channel, but you are powered up with a dazzling array of different armors and weapons to approach the game, and it's still based, I guess, on the combat synergy system. At least they say it is, but it's been transformed so much here they might as well just call it something completely different. Although there are still hints that that this is the battle system that you have been using all along, albeit in a very, very different package. During battle, whenever you go into battle, you can switch between different setups, which are based off of a lot of different things, mostly old school Final Fantasy classes, which I love to see return, like Paladin, White Mage, Black Mage, all of that stuff. And like I said, along with some newer classes as well. These are called schema, and each of these have their own health, active time bar, and attacks associated with it. So each active time bar for each schema constantly charges at its own paces. And what happens here is you switch between them, which is seamless, just kind of like your paradigm shifts. So as you do this, you'll switch between, let's say you have a Paladin, Black Mage, White Mage. So you attack with your Paladin, you do your stuff, you've used up all of your active time bar, so you'll switch to, let's say, Black Mage, for instance, and start firing off some spells. You'll have exhausted that, and you can either switch back to Paladin, who has been charging all this time while you've switched to Black Mage, or you could say, go White Mage and do some protective stuff to yourself, or whatever you want to do. It's really interesting how they've kind of combined all the different paradigm swapping with schema here, just relating it to one character, and that character's Lightning. It's a very different battle system, and I think it's a great battle system. Moving on from battle, the way quests and narrative plays out is also completely different from the other games. Here, you play out on the world called the Nova Chrysalia, which is I don't want to really spoil it, but it does rely heavily on the Fabula Nova Crystallis mythos. Of course, the original world of Final Fantasy XIII's Grand Pulse here plays a huge part, and that's really all I want to say about it. I'll leave that for you to discover in the story. I don't want to take that surprise away from you. So moving on to another interesting idea here related to the narrative is that the game is set on a sort of kind of doomsday clock or counter, if you will, similar to, say, I don't know, the first thing that comes into my mind is Majora's Mask. However, here you're given 7 days in which you can complete the game, in-game days I'm talking about, which can be extended through particular side quests up to a maximum of 13. Unlike Majora's Mask, you can't rewind time, and that's a huge thing. A day in this game lasts 1 hour of real-time play, and as you have only so much time to play the game, there's a very large majority of it that you actually won't be able to see or play or do on your first time through, because the world does play out in real time. So on specific days, on specific nights, things are going to occur, very similar to Majora's Mask, like I'm saying. But the thing here is that you don't have the option of going back and repeating that like you do, in Majora's Mask rewinding time. Now, a lot of people don't like that, but honestly, to me, the fact that the game plays out how it does and in such a quick pace, you are encouraged to go back and see the game again, experience the story in a different way. And I think that's fantastic. More ways to experience a single player RPG is something I'm always for. And I normally don't like counters in my video games that kind of count down. Valkyrie's Profile was another similar one. But, some games will do it right, and I think this game has done it right. And Lightning Returns does, in fact, end the Final Fantasy XIII story. You'll have all of your major characters come back in some way, shape, or form here. Caius makes a return. If you want to talk about him as the villain, I already did a little bit in Final Fantasy XIII too, and a lot of people really enjoy Caius, and that's awesome. He really is getting a lot of the spotlight, and that's rare to see from a sequel of a Final Fantasy game, but there it is. It's a weird way to end out this weird trilogy with Lightning Returns, but I'll say it, it's a great way to end out a great trilogy, be it weird or not. And of course, Lightning Returns ends our month here talking about Fabula Nova Crystallis, the mythology and the entire project. I hope I got to illuminate some of the aspects of it for you, and I myself learned a bunch as well. And maybe I'll entice a few people to actually try the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy. Despite the claims, it is not the worst game ever, Final Fantasy XIII. Final Fantasy XIII 2 is one of my favorite games ever, and Lightning Returns is also a very good game. Honestly, I haven't gotten to spend too much time with it. I've played it through once and it was a while ago. I really think I should go back and really delve deep into it, especially talking about this episode. It's a fantastic game. And if you do want to play this trilogy, go into it without expectations and just kind of roll with it, and I think you really will like Final Fantasy XIII and the world and mythology that it's built. So Final Fantasy's Fabula Nova Crystallis was a bold entry into this new, more flashy and decidedly Japanese style of RPG and presentation that we've seen in recent years. I think for better or worse, looking at the games and how they've come out since then, such as Final Fantasy XIV and Final Fantasy XV, along with the newer games like Final Fantasy Dissidia NT, which is actually coming out today as I'm recording this, and yet to be released Final Fantasy VII Remake, the style of Final Fantasy, this weird kind of eclectic, over-the-top flashy Final Fantasy is the way of the future, and it did start here with Final Fantasy XIII, and it doesn't really show any signs of letting up. So as always, let's go ahead and close out this month of Fenrir and usher in February 2018, the second to last month of this huge project, the month of Garuda, and we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy XIV and another wide variety of topics in that particular month. But here, I know it's a little weird because I already talked about Final Fantasy XIII, but let's watch the intro of Final Fantasy XIII, and hopefully you may get inspired to boot it up again. So thank you very much for watching, and enjoy.
目覚めてからの13日が世界の終わりの始まりだった。
本気か？
黙ってる。
頼るからな。 しじゃねえからな。どうにかなるもんで。みんな戦うとよ。
足手まといだ。